There's been non-stop talk about the humanitarian situation in Venezuela.
Misery and hardship affect almost everybody in this country from end to end.
In a socialist utopia that now leaves nearly every stomach empty.
Well, Katie, first of all, it's another collapse of socialism and a reminder that it doesn't work.
They are about to hit an epic humanitarian crisis we haven't seen in this hemisphere, and they haven't faced there. They probably have less than a week of gasoline left. Now, so there's an Indian company out there that's helping them, and of course the Russians, and that's very unfortunate that they keep giving these guys a lifeline.
In case you haven't heard, US politicians are really concerned for the Venezuelan people's well-being, screaming their all-too-familiar code words that justify US intervention, like a humanitarian crisis and socialist dictator starving his own people. You want to talk about Venezuela? Fine. But if we're going to talk about saving people from a dire humanitarian crisis, we have to talk about sending aid to the tens of millions of Yemenis facing starvation right now as a result of the US-backed Saudi bombing and illegal blockade of Yemen too. Right, Marco Rubio? Marco, you there? Marco? Oh, there you are. Voting against the Senate resolution to end US support for Saudi Arabia's war on Yemen. The US-backed Saudi coalition's assault on Yemen is the real humanitarian crisis. In fact, it's the world's worst humanitarian crisis of the modern era. The war has already taken the lives of 80,000 Yemenis, not including the 85,000 children under the age of 5 who have starved to death as collateral damage of Saudi's bombs. Despite how dire the crisis in Yemen is, it's not even noteworthy to US politicians crying crocodile tears for the people of Venezuela. In fact, these same politicians screaming how socialism is starving Venezuelans have been totally okay with the US selling Saudi Arabia weapons so it can bomb the hell out of the Middle East's poorest country. In 2017, Donald Trump significantly expanded the US-Saudi military relationship, pledging $350 billion worth of US-made weapons to the kingdom in 10 years. That's nearly double what Obama sold in weapons to the Saudis. Arms dealer Lockheed Martin bragged that the deal would bring thousands of high-skilled jobs to the United States. And it's apparent that the blood of the Yemeni people will pay the price to keep the jobs for the war economy flowing. The US isn't just selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, it's actively refueling Saudi jets before they drop bombs on Yemeni homes, schools, hospitals, water treatment facilities, and Yemen's food infrastructure. The US even went as far as helping the Saudis impose an illegal blockade on Yemen, blocking medical supplies, food, and basic humanitarian supplies from coming into the country, exacerbating the famine. This also caused the worst cholera outbreak in history with over 1 million cases. Doctors in Yemen served nobly, going months without receiving pay. The blockade also prevents food imports, and for a country that imports 90% of its food, this is understandably devastating. This is why 20 million of the 25 million people living in Yemen are classified as food insecure. Yet without a shred of self-awareness, US leaders continue to criticize Venezuela for not letting aid in the country. So why is the US contributing to such an inhumane situation in Yemen? The US opposes the Houthi rebels, who overthrew the Saudi-backed former puppet president of Yemen, Abd Rabbu Mansur Hadi. Not pleased with the toppling of its puppet regime, Saudi Arabia formed a coalition with other Arab states, and with the backing of their key allies, the US, UK, and France, launched an all-out assault on the Houthis, which turned into a bombing spree against the entire people of Yemen, its food supply, schools, and hospitals. Keep in mind that Saudi's tremendous military arsenal was largely supplied by the world's largest arms dealer, the United States. We're supposed to believe that the whole war is justified because Saudi Arabia believes that the Houthi rebels are a pawn of Iran, in a larger Iranian plot to take over the Middle East. While Iran has expressed support for the Houthi rebels, there's no evidence that Iran is arming or financing them. What the Saudi coalition is doing is indefensible, and Iran recognizes that, as does the majority of the US Senate and the United Nations. And if the US and Saudi Arabia are concerned that Iran is trying to take control of the Middle East, they might just be projecting their own ambitions onto the situation. In the Middle East, the US screams Iran to justify its aggression. In South America, it's socialism. Any look at a map shows that it's the United States taking over the Middle East, not Iran. And in South America, it's US economic interests and sabotage that's hurting the people. So if anyone tries to tell you that US policy towards Venezuela is oriented towards humanitarianism, remind them of US policy towards Yemen. Remind them how tens of millions of Yemenis are starving while the US continues to help Saudi Arabia wipe out their nation. Remind them how selective, disingenuous, and perverse the US humanitarian concern is. If we continue to misconstrue Washington's motives in Venezuela as humanitarian, we'll be vulnerable to the same cynical manipulation to which we've been subject to time and time again.